Yo, what's up guys, the Anime Titan here, back at it again with another What If, and today I'm doing What If Deku had a kitsune quirk. Alright, so last time we left off, Deku, Ida, and Shoto, well, not, sorry, I'm thinking of canon because I've been rewatching My Hero. It's Deku, Rumi, and Tokoyami, who had come across Ida in his battle against the hero killer Stain. They were able to, Izuku was able to fend him off long enough for more pro heroes to arrive, and Stain to stab the Nomu through its brain. So let's just go ahead and jump into what happens directly afterwards. Stain would now be just standing there when the police would capture him, and he would be basically put away. The medics would immediately check on Ida and Izuku who had taken a large amount of cuts, and Ida himself who had sustained injuries. Rumi and Tokoyami's were minor thanks to Dark Shadow being capable of blocking the attacks, while Rumi was just capable of avoiding them well enough. Izuku and Ida would immediately be taken to a hospital where the two would be left to recover for the night. When the next morning would roll around, Izuku would slowly open his eyes to see that Rumi and Tokoyami would be by his bedside. Rumi would be to his right, surprisingly close to the bed itself, while Tokoyami would be standing against a wall near the exit. Izuku would have opened his eyes completely. Where Rumi would have seen this, she would have immediately started yelling at him. "You idiot, what the hell were you thinking? Did you really think you could beat him? Are you that stupid? What the hell do you think you could have done if he actually got his hands on you? What happens if you would have fallen behind? What are you, an idiot?" She would repeat yet again. Izuku would slowly lift his head, smiling, and reply with, "I'm not an idiot, I'm just a really caring friend." Izuku would then slowly look around to see that there was a curtain. He would then ask, "Where's Ida?" with Rumi replying with, "He's on the other side of the curtain." Izuku would nod and ask if they could, move the curtain so that he could speak with Ida. Rumi would nod before, just opening the curtain to reveal Ida sitting up straight, staring into his lap. Izuku would look at Ida and then ask, "Hey Ida, are you okay?" Ida would look over at Izuku before he'd get out of bed and bow really, really, really damn low. This would surprise everybody, wondering why the hell Ida was doing this, when out of nowhere Ida would say, "I'm sorry for all the trouble I had caused. If it wasn't for me, you would have gotten out there unharmed, and much less a bunch of other people, and I would have been fine as well. I apologize for my stupidity as well as my my hatred driven by revenge. It is unbecoming of a hero and a hero in training to do such a thing, thus I am ashamed of my actions." Izuku would just nod his head, sorry guys, before he would reply with, "It's fine, there's nothing we can do about it now." Ida would just nod before the door would slowly open, revealing the chief of police, aka man wearing a suit with a dog head. He would yet again go over the nonsense that he did last time, saying that due to Stain suffering some burns as well as physical damage, the credit will go to Endeavor. Izuku would reluctantly nod at this before he would ask the chief if they were going to be punished, with the chief telling them that they'd be let off the hook this time and only this time. So then we go ahead and fast forward to the day that Izuku and Ida are discharged from the hospital, and after the exams. Well, not the exams. Hang on guys, someone's calling. Izuku would have stayed home for the weekend after he had been discharged, while doing some light training to get his body in shape, seeing as he was bedridden due to the nurses. He couldn't do anything too strenuous besides a light walk in the morning, and if really, really pushing it, he could have done a jog, but the nurses wouldn't allow him. Soon, Izuku would return back to school, with the teachers telling them that the final exams will be coming up. Most of the students would be panicking at this, while the rest of them would be wondering what would happen. This is when the teacher would tell them about the super fun or exclusive camp that only the people that pass the exams will be going on. Most of the kids would be really super duper psyched about this before they'd all sprint off after class to the mall. They'd all be getting what they needed, with Izuku just trying to get himself a new pair of dumbbells as well as maybe some better clothes. While he'd be walking through slowly, not really paying attention to his surroundings, a strange man would walk up next to Izuku and grab his attention. This would be Shigaraki, or Tomura Shigaraki, otherwise known by many fans around the world, Hanzi. I'm just joking. Not by many fans, but like that's personally what I call him. Hanzi or hands-on kind of guy. You get it? You get it? Yeah, stupidity. It's my thing. But anyway, he would then ask Izuku why everybody is flocking to Stain instead of the League of Villains, and Izuku would go to explain that Stain has a solid reasoning for doing what he is doing. He does what he does, not because he wants to, but because he sees that it is needed in order to, well, actually get proper heroes, and the people are understanding that heroes are becoming more and more, well, self-centered. This is why more and more people are following Stain's ideology. So Shigaraki would be really super duper psyched about this utter nonsense before he'd leave off, and Rumi would walk up to Izuku asking who that was. Izuku would reply with, "Call the police and tell them that one of the members of the League of Villains was here." Rumi would quickly do so, and the police would arrive no less than about 10 minutes later before they'd start searching the area within a 10-block radius for Shigaraki, and would come up with nothing. Izuku and the rest of his class would still be kind of, well, freaked out at this, seeing that one of the League of Villains, directly targeted Izuku Midoriya. The teachers themselves would be wondering why he would target Izuku specifically, and Izuku would reply with, he was with the hero killer Stain, and thus was asked why people are following Stain instead of the League of Villains, which he then gave his honest answer to. The teachers would as well commend Izuku for staying calm under pressure before they'd dismiss him and have a further meeting. So anyway, Izuku would have eventually gotten back to the mall and gotten what he needed, being some new clothes as well as some new weights. Not like dumbbells. No, I'm talking about, if you know Rock Lee, how he has training weights. You know, the weighted down leg weights. Yeah, those kind of weights. Eventually, you know when you have hiccups, but like it's about to start? Like you know you're gonna hiccup, but you haven't hiccuped in a while? I don't know how to explain this. Okay, so I was just having a normal breath before I felt a slight hiccup. Then I cut off circulation to my lungs by holding my breath, thus causing the hiccups to stop. So maybe that'll help you if you feel that you're gonna hiccup before you actually properly start. Just shut your mouth and don't breathe. But so anyway, eventually the final exams would come around, and things wouldn't change much, only with, I think, like 2-3 teams, but I'm only going to go over the important ones. Kirishima and Rikido Sato will still fight Cementos and fail. Momoyara Rozu and Shoto Todoroki will still fight Eraserhead and they will pass. Denki Kaminari and Mina Ashido and will fight Principal Nezu and still fail. Mashiro Ojiro and Tenya Ida will still fight Power Loader and pass. Tsuyu Asui and Fumikage Tokoyami will still pass the test with Ectoplasm, while Toru Hagakure and Mezo Shoji will still pass Snipe's test. This is where things will change just ever so slightly, seeing as, if I remember correctly, Midnight sort of kinda seduced Zero, and Mineta just sprinted off. So this is where things will start changing for the firsts. So Zero and Abarai would walk into the arena where Midnight was, before Zero would start asking Abarai about a plan. Abarai would tell him that their best course of action is to wrap Midnight Sensei up really tightly before she's capable of using her quirk, which would put both of them to sleep. Zero would not before the two of them would start making their way through the area looking for the exit, while also keeping on high alert for Midnight. However, this is when Midnight's gas would slowly start creeping in, and it would catch Zero, but before he could inhale a large amount, he would use some tape and wrap it around his mouth and his nose. He would give Abarai some of the tape as well, who would do the same, reluctantly, not wanting to at all, but she would do it nonetheless. This is when Midnight arrived and would slowly start bouncing her assets around, trying to mesmerize Hunter, which would end up working ever so slightly, with a trickle of blood being shown on the tape. Midnight would inwardly smile at this, seeing that she still has her charms, and slowly start making her way to Zero and Abarai, well, Shiozaki, who would start, I don't want to say yeeting, but basically that's what they do. Zero yeets tape at midnight, and Abarai would be yeeting vines at midnight. But so basically, Zero would try to wrap out at midnight, who would skillfully be avoiding most of his attacks before grabbing onto his tape and pulling him close, thus causing Zero's nosebleed to increase that much more, before she would wrap him up in his own tape and smother him, thus knocking him out of the match. Yeah, surprising way to go, boys. Surprising way to go. But anyway, this is when Abarai would step up, using the distraction that Midnight had used for herself, which would be Midnight, well, basically coddling, I want to say, or just smothering Zero. Smothering in air quotes, seeing as it would technically be considered molesting if she actually laid her hands on Zero. Just saying. So basically, Shiozaki would quickly make a move, sending vines to the ground that would end up grabbing onto Midnight and subduing the teacher, thus allowing her to pass thanks to Midnight's own stupidity. So Shiozaki passes and Zero still fails. Ochako Uraraka and Hyuga Aoyama would still pass their test with 13, and this is where the second change would come in. Kyoka, Jiro, and Rumi against present Mike. Kyoka and Rumi would still be trying to travel through the forest, trying to find the exit, which is where Prison Mike would be waiting. They would try to skillfully avoid as much of Prison Mike's attacks as possible, but wouldn't work seeing as Rumi has highly sensitive ears and so does Kyoka. The two would eventually make their way closer to where the exit is, which they'd then find Prison Mike guarding. This would annoy both women, seeing as he was one loud and proud bastard, but Kyoka couldn't directly aim at Prison Mike, seeing as she doesn't know his exact location. Rumi herself couldn't really do anything, seeing as she was more of a close-range fighter. Prison Mike would then let out another blaring scream, causing both girls to drop to their knees in utter pain. Rumi's ears would be ringing off the charge as well as Kyoka's. The two of them would then slowly get up before they'd hear another sound wave coming their way. Both girls would quickly shut their ears at this, and then the sound wave would pass over them, knocking them back, but this time their hearing would be intact. This is, however, where Prison Mike would lose the edge, as he would intake a large breath yet again. This time, however, Rumi and Kyoka would have heard him intake the breath, like that, basically, before he could scream, and this would thus allow them to pinpoint his location. Rumi would cover her ears as well as Kyoka, this time as the sound wave would yet again blow over them, this time with the two being more prepared. Shortly after, they'd start sprinting in the direction, with Rumi leading Kyoka, before yet another sound wave would come blaring towards them. They'd cover their ears and push through the sound wave yet again, making their way closer to Prison Mike every step. Rumi would have picked up a stone along the way as well as a stick, a pretty sturdy one, might I say, before they'd continue. Kyoka would have wondered what Rumi was doing with the stick, but she'd tell Kyoka that she'll just have to trust her. The two would eventually make it within seeing distance of Prison Mike, meaning they could see him, but he couldn't see them. And this is when Rumi would use the stick and the rock to her full advantage by throwing the rock into the air and then hitting it with a stick. sending it blasting at Prison Mike relatively fast. Prison Mike would let out a smaller scream, blocking the rock, but this would be his downfall where Kyoka would immediately blast the sound wave straight back at Prison Mike, this time knocking him backwards into the wall. Shortly after he had hit the wall, Rumi would appear delivering a devastating kick to his stomach and then one to the chest, driving all of the wind out of Prison Mike's body, causing him to, actually lose his breath and thus slowly and steadily make his way to his feet. This is, however, when he would quickly look up to see Rumi coming in with yet another roundhouse kick, which he would block, but however not be able to see Kyoka coming in from the side with one of her earphone jacks, which would stab into his ribcage and start, emitting frequency into Prison Mike's body, causing his insides to vibrate, and thus making Prison Mike drop down to the ground, where she and Kyoka would quickly, cuff him? Yeah, cuff him, thus allowing Kyoka and Rumi to pass. And for those of you that are wondering why I'm downplaying Prison Mike like this, the quickest and easiest way to explain it is the man's caught off guard. There's not much you can do if you're caught off guard, because then it basically screws with every single plan you have, which is why you have to plan at least 3 different steps ahead. Like Shikamaru in the tuning exams. Whee! Say what you want, I love that lazy ass Nara. Anyway, next up would be Katsuki, Bakugou, and Izuku Midoriya. 16 minutes from just explanations. Damn. That's dope. Doesn't matter. So, Katsuki, Bakugou, and Izuku Midoriya would still be fighting All Might. The two of them would slowly enter the arena, with Izuku already having 2 fires in hand. Katsuki himself would be ready with both gauntlets almost already halfway filled, seeing as he had already started popping explosions before the battle. And I do apologize for my fans that are massive Japanese lovers. I keep saying Deku has a kitsune quirk. It's kitsune. I know this, but I prefer to not dumb it down, but I prefer to say it in a more English fashion for my dubbed watchers, seeing as it's, oh no, it's the 9-tailed fox. The kitsune, what is it? The Yoko? The kitsune no Yoko. No, Kyubi no Yoko. Yeah, basically kitsune is the English way to pronounce it, but if you're going for a more Japanese fashion, it would be kitsune. Like when you say kitsune bai, which is foxfire, and so on and so on and so on. Hey, that's a good name for a move. Kitsune bai! That doesn't matter. So basically, Izuku would be continuing walking down the main street with Izuku. Izuku's walking with Izuku. Yes, my friends, Izuku's walking with Izuku. But so basically, Izuku would continue walking down the street with Katsuki Bakugou, where the two of them would be doing everything in their power to stay vigilant. Izuku's ears would constantly be twitching, trying to pick up the slightest inflex of sound, while Bakugou would constantly be scanning. The two of them would continue walking when out of nowhere Izuku would hear the faint sounds of windows smashing before he'd look ahead of him and see some windows falling from the buildings. Immediately he'd grab Bakugou and leap into an alley, avoiding the attack just barely, where All Might would land in the middle of the road. The two boys would start listening while All Might was talking. I am here. Come on, heroes. I'm expecting more from you. This would cause Bakugou to want to run out and attack All Might, but Izuku would grab onto him and hold out his fingers, telling him to just wait. Bakugou would grit his teeth but would nod, before All Might would continue walking down the street saying, Why are you hiding? Don't tell me that you're afraid. Bakugou would immediately get annoyed at this, but Izuku would yet again grip onto him, showing him to wait. That's when All Might would step past the alley, as All Might would then say, guess they're not here. He would then slowly start walking forward to go check near the entrance, when out of nowhere he would hear a explosion coming from right behind him. He turned around to have a massive explosion go off him in his face, not being Bakugou's gauntlet. Seeing as Bakugou had been training with Rumi and Izuku, his explosions would at least be seasoned like 2, no, not 2, like season 3 strength. So yeah, Bakugou would have let off a massive explosion in All Might's face, sending All Might nowhere, just dazing him ever so slightly. However, this is when Izuku would come in and let out a massive fireball straight towards All Might, who would take it to the stomach. Not near the injury, chill, just take it to the stomach. All Might would shrug it off as if it was nothing, before he'd charge in at the two once more, delivering not a gruesome punch, but a punch nonetheless. Both Izuku and Bakugou's wind would be solidly knocked out, while All Might would just be standing there with a smile on his face, saying, "Ah, seems you heroes are weak and not worth my time." This would cause Bakugou to grit his teeth before he'd get up again, charging at All Might. Izuku would shortly follow suit, seeing as Bakugou lost his temper. Izuku would be close up behind Bakugou, where Bakugou would launch a double-handed explosion, to All Might's stomach, with Izuku jumping over Bakugou, trying to hit him with a axe kick straight to the head. All Might would quickly put his hand in front of Bakugou's explosion, before putting his other hand out to block Izuku. However, Izuku's agility would be far, higher than All Might had expected or anticipated, when Izuku would quickly step onto his arm and fling himself over, landing behind All Might, kicking him in the back of the knee, causing him to drop down. All Might only dropped down for one reason: he wasn't expecting it and was caught off guard by Izuku's agility. This is when Bakugou would yet again let off a massive explosion, actually sending All Might back for not focusing on him and focusing to keep his balance, but rather focusing on Izuku, who had used his agility to get behind him. All Might would be sent back about half a centimeter. Yes, you heard me, half a centimeter, 5 millimeters. I know that's a hell of a lot, but you guys gotta understand, this is season 3 Bakugou power level here. We can't underestimate him that much. 3 centimeters is best he's got, not 3 centimeters, half a centimeter is the best he's got. Bakugou would then immediately jump back before telling Izuku to move, deku, where Izuku would comply, moving to Bakugou's side within an instant, as Bakugou would immediately lift his gauntlet and pull the pin. A raging inferno would be sent straight towards All Might, who would not be afraid to tank the blow. However, Izuku would then immediately step in, as he himself would add in some of his emerald green fire, then start manipulating the flames into a certain shape. The shape would take that of a kitsune as well as a dragon, with a emerald green kitsune sprinting its way towards All Might, and a Japanese dragon roaring and flying its way towards All Might. The two attacks would immediately collide with All Might, who would be genuinely surprised, with a dragon chomping down on his, not chomping, but biting down onto his shoulder, while the kitsune itself would have rammed straight into his stomach. The two attacks would actually cause All Might to be sent back by a solid meter this time, where Bakugou and Izuku would waste no time, turning tail and sprinting for the exit. All Might would see this and wouldn't want it to happen, when he would get up and then jump through the air, chasing after the two boys. Izuku would immediately have heard the jump, not immediately, but would have heard it nonetheless, as he would have told Bakugou that All Might is on his way here. Bakugou would nod, as he'd send himself into the air with his explosions, before Izuku would shortly join him. Bakugou would then immediately grab onto Izuku before using his other hand to start rotating. For those of you who has watched Twin Heroes Rising, this is the explosion catapult, just a little earlier on in the series. Bakugou would then immediately launch Izuku towards All Might, who is still mid-air, while Izuku would be propelling himself forward with jets of fire. All Might himself would have thought this was futile before he would try to punch Izuku. However, Izuku would hold out his hand using his telekinesis. Yes, this is something that you guys haven't heard about in a while, have you? Izuku actually still has his telekinesis. So Izuku would immediately grab onto All Might using telekinesis before pulling at straws. straws, but physically pulling All Might towards him, then rotating and sending All Might back once again. All Might in mid-air this time would jump yet again, sending wind pressure and forcing him back to Izuku and Bakugou. Izuku would then yet again grab All Might while falling, before throwing All Might away, and then using his telekinesis to grab at least like a solid chunk of building, which All Might had punched off earlier. He would land on the rock, before having it lowered to the ground. He would then sprint up after Bakugou, who had gone further along this time, before he would hear All Might coming down on them yet again. This time, however, All Might, instead of trying to get close, would send down a punch with wind pressure equivalent to that of an earthquake, shaking the surrounding area, causing Izuku and Bakugou to lose their balance. Izuku, however, would quickly use his telekinesis, grabbing onto Bakugou and then launching him towards the exit, which All Might would see and then immediately charge after Bakugou. Izuku would then launch basically a jet of flames in front of All Might, well, not in front of All Might, but in his path, which All Might would slam into, or rather, better yet, fly straight through, before he would get to the other side, seeing Bakugou even closer to the exit. Bakugou would thus turn around just as he's about to hit the exit to see All Might still closing in on him, where he'd lift up his other gauntlet, pulling the pin and launching a, well, how do you put it? A torpedo of flames towards All Might, who would have been hit head on, while Bakugou would be flung back even faster, crossing the gate, allowing both him and Izuku to pass. That's kind of a sad ending, but like still, I understand. So anyway, Bakugou would be smiling as well as Izuku as they'd hear the speaker blaring saying, "Izuku Midoriya and Bakugou Katsuki pass." And the two of them would, Bakugou would smile, while Izuku would slowly make his way towards the exit, where Bakugou would be waiting. Bakugou would smile as he'd see Izuku, and he'd give him a fist bump just as he'd step through the gate, with Izuku doing the same. Bakugou would then look at Izuku saying, "You did well, nerd," with Izuku replying, "Not too bad for a loudmouth." The two of them would then chuckle as they'd head off to the rest of the students to get the announcement. This is where Aizawa would announce that he was actually lying about those who failed not going on the camp, and this would be a training camp for them to train their quirks. The students would nonetheless be pretty happy about this, hearing that they could still go on the training camp, with Aizawa then eventually telling them that they need to pack their stuff and be ready for it by the next day, and that their parents already know about this. Nonetheless, the kids would go home and start packing. And actually, that's where I'm going to end off this part. I'm sorry for you guys that was actually beginning to enjoy it. The fight scene in this one is a little bit senile, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, then don't be afraid to comment down below, telling me what else you'd like to see happening in the series. If you didn't like it, you can give me a reason, or you could just forget about watching the videos. I could care much less. I am not the kind of guy who's out there, "Oh, cool, I'm gonna do YouTube because I want to get famous." No, I'm not the person that's doing that. I'm actually just doing that because I have a lot of free time, which will actually be cut down really damn soon thanks to school. Due to COVID, we were only going to school 5 days in 2 weeks' time, meaning 2 days the one week, 3 days the next week. But from next week, we are going 4 days every single week due to our grade 12s not being at school because they are busy with exams elsewhere. But anyway, that isn't your problem, that is mine. This is the Anime Titan signing out. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.